So, how do we escape the Matrix? That's the question that everyone has been asking. And very famous people like Andrew Tate have been talking about the Matrix constantly out in the public. And so today I want to define not only what the Matrix actually is, but also, more importantly, how to actually escape in the fastest, cheapest, most efficient way possible. And also the reality of what our situation is, how to really escape. See, most people out there, when they talk about the Matrix, they're saying that, oh, money will help you escape. Being in an offshore location will help you escape. No, neither of those things are true. You have to establish your foundation first to really legally and lawfully escape, and then we can start talking about all those other factors. So first of all, what is the Matrix? How are we actually defining that? If we look at the movie, the famous, trilogy, or I guess now they added a fourth really shitty one, but if we look at those series of movies and sort of overlay them over our current reality, many people said that the original Matrix was a documentary. And I would agree with that in many ways. However, we don't have, Neo or other people flying around and sort of jumping across buildings, at least as far as I've seen. So there's a lot of the sci-fi type of that film that, you may not necessarily believe is an actual documentary. But what did the movies get right? Ultimately, in the movies, you have this system, which is the Matrix, where humans are farmed for their energy by machines who at that point in time control the world. And then a small faction of people who are the last free people of the world are fighting to pull people out of slavery to the machines. And the Matrix is a mental construct that people are plugged into directly. And they have to, live in this world similar to ours. But the reality is it's all an illusion. And there's a meta world outside of that certain people wake up to, one at a time, as they're pulled out by people like Neo and Morpheus and others who are inside the Matrix, awaking people to the reality that, you're a slave. You're a slave. So when it comes to our current reality, are we actually plugged in by the back of our necks, and is this actually an illusion? I mean, it's possible, certainly possible, but in terms of what I can actually prove, we are actually plugged in from a legal perspective, and it all starts at your birth certificate, which comes with a 9-digit social security number issued by the US government. And so what does that 9-digit number actually represent? It is a corporate identifying number. It represents your corporate person in their system. And that system being the corporation of the United States government. The United States is a company, just like other sovereign countries around the world are all their own companies. And when you're a citizen or a member of that country, you do so by your birth certificate, and now you're opting in to receive certain benefits from that government, right? And so here's what it comes down to. That 9-digit social security number, if you have one of those and you're using that to do business, you are acting like a slave. Because in the eyes of the United States, that's what you are. You're a product, you're a 9-digit number, and from the moment you're born, you're something to be monetized by those above us, by the bankers, by the politicians, by all of those that steal and extract in this calcified system that we live in. And so, I see all these people out there like talking about money, if I have X amount of millions of dollars, now I'm free of the Matrix, I don't have to work a 9-to-5 job. And I see some people saying, if I'm live in some other country, now you're an expat or you can drop your US citizenship or, something like that. But all these mechanisms, they don't get around the fact that you're 9-digit social, you're signed to a trust created by the US government. It's a sub-trust under their system. And so part of the first thing, in realizing what the Matrix is realizing that it's a legal system set up to control us. And not just physically, in terms of our earnings and, all these rules you have to follow and actions you have to take, but also our minds. That's really the most important thing that's being controlled here, is how we think and how we perceive reality around us. And you'll see that echoing back to the Matrix movies as well, because you have these two sort of mechanisms to escape. One, you physically unplug yourself. So that's the physical aspect of you being harvested like in this little tube. And then when you unplug from that, you can plug back in and you're still in the Matrix, but then it's still a matter of your mind. Because Neo has to go through this period, where he goes through certain experiences to realize that he is the one. And same thing, even if we're not the one, we're all going through our own individual journeys of self-actualization, self-realization. And as we're going through that, part of it is acquiring knowledge so we can realize, where we are ultimately. So, similar to Neo in the Matrix, where he had to, unplug himself and then go through that process of awakening his mind and gaining the knowledge to, then start to be able to control all that power. It's the same thing that we have to do in this reality, in the sense that we do have to unplug ourselves physically from the legal system. We have to be able to do business and to be able to move through the world legally in a way that is outside of the Matrix, outside of the US government, in the private realm. Okay? And then the second aspect is, even once we've done that, we've escaped in one sense, in the literal sense. But now we have to then escape in terms of our beings. What's the purpose of our lives? Why are we here? And so that's, the kind of realization and sort of looking at our world and starting to see the real truth for what it is, letting the veils drop. And, we each have our own individual experiences as to where that will lead. I'm going through the same process myself, and I'm just a small drop in this entire ocean. But all I can do is give my perspective and from what I've already done. And so one of the fundamental flaws that I see with, outside in the mainstream is everyone's talking about the Matrix, or not everyone, but a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people are aware of what it is. But when it comes to how to escape, you see all these solutions. I've heard one that's like, oh, make a lot of money. You got millions of dollars, you don't have to work. Okay, you can retire on an island. Fine. But you're still signed. If you were born here, you're still signed to the US government. You're still signed to another government, which fundamentally it's all, under the US in terms of the world power. And in terms of when you look at the currency, that's really what it comes down to. Almost every currency in the world is pegged to the dollar. Not every single one. But the vast majority of the world is under English common law, and currency-wise is under the US dollar. And so the US is clearly the center of the Matrix, and the control, spreads outwards from there. But when it comes to how to operate in commerce, that is the first part that, is really the easy part of this whole equation, in terms of escaping. And it's one that I see very few people talking about, but it's the fact that, okay, you have the social security number. How do we stop using it to do business? And also, we can't get an LLC, we can't get an S Corp, we can't get a C Corp. Why? Because those are all still in the Matrix. They're all created by the government. And then you got to listen to your accountants and your lawyers and all your, Agent Smiths out there, right? Enforcing the Matrix. That's what they do. They just are trying to enforce rules, regulations, and procedures of the government. They don't care about you or I. And that's the kind of funny thing about this reality. There's so many of these enforcers of the Matrix, and people don't even, people are friendly with them. They're like, oh yeah, I love this guy. This guy's like my best friend. He's helping me out. But the reality is they're enforcing the rules that keep you a slave. So what you have to first realize is that you have to wake up standing on your own 2 feet. You don't need accountants. You don't need lawyers to do business. You don't need any of these people. What you need to understand is there's a public realm and a private realm. Our 9-digit social security number, that's a public trust issued by the US government. Now, you need to open up a private trust and understand how to operate in the private realm as a sovereign, essentially, at least under the law, under English common law. So I've seen a number of different ways to open up private trusts, and there is information out there about this, although not much. Once again, you got to dig into the corners and these little communities on the edges of the matrix to find out about this. But once you do, for me, it was looking at what's the simplest, answer to this question. What's the simplest document, the simplest solution to achieving freedom, meaning no forms, no taxes, no liability, nothing, right? And that is done through the 508c1a trust. That's one of the names for it. The other name is the Bulletproof Trust. The long name is the Common Law Irrevocable Ecclesiastical Trust. And as far as the 508, it's really a financial miracle because there's one simple line in the IRS code, out of these 10,000 pages, one simple line, where when you use it, you have an agreement, a trust agreement, which in the code the specific wording is a convention, and it's with Jesus Christ. And that is the simplest way. When you have this specialized private trust agreement, this convention written out, now you can do business underneath it your entire life. You can buy and sell things, you can earn money. Anything you could do in a normal corporate entity from the government, you can do in this private trust, pretty much, with a few, rare exceptions. And once you're operating privately, you're free. That's it. Blink of an eye. And this can be done literally in one afternoon. Unlike most trusts where you might need lawyers or other people to administer it and then, research it and all that. No, none of that. This is a templated document, 9 pages, super easy. Once you buy it, you print it out, you sign it, you notarize it, and in one afternoon, boom, private trust is opened. Then there's a 5-minute process. You get your EIN from the IRS. They know about this. Again, this is completely lawful, completely legal. The IRS not only knows about this, but many of the highest level people in this country use this strategy. So there's no way they could ever remove it because, again, now you're going to have to start going after churches, billionaires, businessmen, politicians, all these kinds of people. And believe me, it's the last thing that the IRS wants to do. So once you have the right documents, the knowledge in your head in order to do that, then boom, you're free to move about the world in a way that's unobstructed by not only the US government, but no other government around the world. The only person that you're under is Jesus Christ. That is it. So to everyone else, you're a sovereign entity other than God. And that's where we want to be. Because when we understand the Constitution, our God-given rights, that is where we can unlock how to move in the world without taxes, without liability, with less stress, less worry, and just, complete freedom in that sense. Okay, so here's where it gets a little bit more complicated is not the physical side, of how do we actually unplug ourselves from the legal system of the matrix, but mentally. How do we start to look at reality and realize that a lot of this is an illusion? And not a lot of this, all of it. All of it is an illusion. And how do we learn to drop those veils and see what's really going on around us? So in terms of some evidence for this, let's start by looking at our government. So people ask me, is it ethical to escape? Well, let's look at the government, what they're doing. Is it ethical, all the things that they're doing, in terms of going around the world, spending trillions of dollars on wars, our so-called education system that's indoctrinating kids into learning, who knows what kind of crap these days. It's just an absolute joke. And in terms of every single city, when you look at these cities that even collect the most tax revenue, where does that go? You look around. Infrastructure is deteriorating, services are getting worse. It's just a clear sign of an empire in decline, right? And in terms of, looking at this matrix and this reality with all these kind of clowns in charge and these politicians, and do you really think that that is real? Or are you being tested? Are we being tested? Because to me, when I see the kind of presidents that are being elected, the kinds of governors, just all kinds of people. Then look, there are a handful of exceptions that seem somewhat competent for their job. But most of these people, just complete shit shows. Just absolutely, To actually believe anything that they would say, you'd have to be completely naive, really. And so once you start to pull on these little threads, everything just starts to unravel. Every single federal agency, none of them have any oversight. They all have these massive budgets. Where does the money go? Trillions of dollars disappear here, in these wars. Trillions of dollars disappear over there, and all these other calcified organizations. The FDA, who knows who runs that? It's one of the most powerful organizations in the entire world. They control all food and drugs, basically for the world, because most of the world pegs to whatever the United States says. And yet we don't know anyone in charge. We don't know anything going on about anything. And so that's just one example. I mean, I could just go down, a huge, massive list here. And, a guy who's good for that is Balaji Srinivasan. He's written a book called The Network State, and he really goes into detail on not just how corrupt it is, but how really fake it all is. All these numbers, they're all artificially manipulated, engineered. I mean, even look at the way the rates have gone, oh, everything's okay, inflation's transitory. And then all of a sudden, they spike rates massively, like the massive rate hike, most massive hike we've seen in 50 years. So how did that, boom, on a dime, change from, oh, everything's fine, nothing to worry about here, to now just reversing completely in the opposite direction and completely fucking everyone over who bought these toxic bonds that are just, being completely depleted in value, and just all the businesses and all the other sorts of economic machines that are dependent on stable rates that are now, seesawing all over the place. And the list goes on and on. I mean, there's so many examples of complete just government, incompetence. And so part of this reality, I believe, is seeing what parts of it are fake, which is basically everything. And then as you start to move towards the truth, as you start to move closer to God, we realize that what's the point of being here? What's the point of being in the matrix? It's to get knowledge so we can wake up. Another word for matrix means womb. And so we need, we're all gestating here together. And we need certain knowledge in order for our minds to expand and to realize, wow, there's something above this prison that we're living in. And that's, in terms of ultimately reaching that, I mean, how to actually do it, that's your guess is as good as mine. I'm still on that same process. But what I can say is, if we're going to get existential for a second, I've read many of the, all the Abrahamic religious texts and, obviously the Bible. And when part of the tricky thing with all these texts is they're all like ancient. They're all from other ages. And so part of the tricky thing is we have to take these, saints and these prophets that have bestowed upon us this great knowledge, but we have to overlay it over the current world, because otherwise it would be too easy. If we could just listen to exactly what they said, oh, that'd be great. But it's very hard to do that because you have to take what they said and you have to overlay it over the current day world and then operate, in the words of all of these prophets who had Christ consciousness, who were all awakened to the nature of our reality. That includes Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, Ram, Ganesh. I mean, there's a list. And so when we look at, I think the most obvious religious, or philosophical context that puts the matrix into light is actually Buddhism, because it talks about these cycles that you're stuck in and trying to escape birth and death and reincarnation on this wheel and achieve enlightenment. And enlightenment is, again, knowledge, is achieving the knowledge to escape and to stop, that painful cycle again and again and again. And so when you look at how the matrix works, that's sort of what it is, right? These are all enforced programs, physical and mental, that keep us stuck in patterns again and again and again, making the same mistakes almost eternally, until finally we can have the courage to start to go on the right path, to get the right knowledge, and start to wake up from this eternity of just the same thing again and again. And so I'm not saying I'm enlightened, but I'm saying that I think there is a purpose to why we're here. And so, we have to move towards that. And I think getting closer to God and however you define that. I think that that's the most important thing that we can do. And part of understanding what the matrix is and how to escape, that is absolutely essential in terms of that goal of getting closer to God. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you want to learn more about private trusts, feel free to join our school community. You can find the link in the description below. And other than that, I wish you luck out there in the matrix. Things are getting harder. You can look around and you can see that the wheel is turning, and as it turns, it's grinding people into dust. I mean, I can see it physically, I can see it mentally, and all the people around me. There's so many things going on. And so drastic times require drastic measures. So, jump in the school community, check out how to set up your private trust, get out of the matrix. It's really very, very inexpensive. I mean, you can even finance this stuff, and for less than $100 a month. I mean, you're basically out from a legal perspective, and then start working on your mind. Once you're out and you're not paying taxes and you're free from all of that, you don't have to file any forms. You're not writing off G-Wagons or doing cost segregation studies anymore. None of that, right? Now you can spend all that mental energy and time on what's more important. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all in the next one.